how do you build the commercial venues around the stadium? How did you sense and start to feel what does the fan want around the stadium that is accessible and easy to, and what do they want?
Yeah, we will build things like I think at some point a food hall, probably some bars, sports bars, etc. But the retail side is going to be sort of what I'll call phase two for sure. Like in other words, the housing is the real focus on both sides of the river that we kind of sit on.
Okay, awesome.
But look, other developers are coming into Pawtucket and starting to buy real estate and starting to look at programming things around the team and the stadium. So I think that's a very good barometer of the way people are viewing, what I call the shift in fortunes of Pawtucket because of what we planted there. And I'm very, very proud of the social and economic impact that we're having in Rhode Island. I'm very proud of obviously what's happened in Ipswich during our ownership over the last 4 years. Because these teams, if they're done right, they can and should create a fair bit of positive economic momentum, increased jobs, increased investment, et cetera. And it's a utility in terms of the broader space that I'm very proud of.
And because, for example, I grew up in in South Florida and Miami Beach when the Miami FC was just born in the NASL. And when I was going to the games, I noticed that outside it was in a big parking lot in of a university, and I knew that the fans what they wanted was the food and the beer because it's a Latin American community, and then there was the team shop. Now, do you educate yourself on, for example, what is the culture of the city in which you build in, and what are the preferences of the fans? Is that a big player of how you build the commercial landscape that surrounds the stadium, or is it not that important to take into consideration for the listeners who are builders in sports?
No, I think the quick answer is you obviously have to be sensitive or attuned to what I call the demographics, relative to any project. So, our focus has been on creating a world-class experience for anyone who comes into our stadium. And so the reviews for the design of our stadium has been incredible. The design of the concourses, the ability for fans to move around, the sight lines, there's not a bad seat in the entire venue. The quality of the reaction from the community in terms of when we're playing, to see the way all of the very diverse crowd, everything from young to old, from the every single demographic, and Rhode Island is an incredible sort of soccer rich state. The Portuguese, the Italians, Colombians, West Africans, so South American. So, that's one of many things. And this is their sport. This is the sport that they love. So, it's again one of many things I'm humble and proud about in terms of being able to really give them something to cheer on in their own state. Because previously in Rhode Island, if you really wanted to cheer a team on, you were almost always going to Boston or New York.
Okay, okay. And when you mentioned before the housing development opportunity around sports venues and sports infrastructure, you mentioned housing. Is it athlete related housing, or is it for the fans? Who is this?
Yeah, I mean, at some point we do put our players up in nice housing. At some point we could ostensibly move them into the housing that we build around the stadium.